Back here on Radio Row now, joining me, former New England Patriot, won a Super Bowl champion with the New Orleans Saints. My good friend, number 44, Heath Evans, joins us in Indianapolis. Heath, how you doing?
I'm good, Zach. Good to be here with you.
How you enjoying your time in Indy? You've been liking it? You know, it's better than Dallas. Last year was a wreck. I was there, and it was ice all over the roads. You know, they had those cranes trying to pick up the snow. They weren't prepared for you. Liking your time in Indy, though?
Hey, it's easy. Even that scenario in Dallas would be easier than playing in one. So, listen, this is footloose and fancy-free for me. Study the game, have fun talking about it. But, you know, when you're not having to build a game plan in your head for 6 days straight, this is much, much easier.
Don't give me that BS. If Belichick called you up tomorrow and said, come on, play in the game, you're playing.
Hey, you know what? I've got about 10 snaps for him, but I'm not sure if they'd be the productive ones he was looking for. So, hey, I'm happy doing what I'm doing.
Have you gone back? I know you played in that 07 Super Bowl. Have you gone back, and have you ever watched that game?
I have. You know, right after the game, obviously a huge disappointment. I always want to see how I did. You know, and that was a game that I didn't really play a lot in. I thought I was going to play about 40 to 45 snaps, and that was not the case, and we lost. So, it's still a bitter, bitter memory in this mind, but at least I was able to get 1-09 with the Saints.
I remember I was sitting there on that day screaming from my couch, what is Belichick doing at the end? Did you like his play calls? Because, you know, most people would have thought, hey, go get the field goal, but then he did 3 deep balls to Randy Moss, and it just didn't work out.
Well, we're aggressive. You know, the whole time that I was there, aggressive was the focus of that offense and defense. You know, that team is still aggressive. And so the 4th and 2 call in Indy, you know, listen, that's how Bill coaches. That's ultimately what wins championships. You look at Sean Payton in the Super Bowl. Who does an onside kick coming out of halftime? So I don't second guess these great coaches. Would I have loved to run the ball more consistently through that game? Most definitely yes. Do I wish we would have stuck with the game plan that was implemented throughout the 2 weeks of practice? Most definitely yes. But you don't second guess Bill Belichick. You're not right too many times doing that.
And I know they're downplaying this a lot, and I expect that. I know there's only 8 players from that 07 game, but isn't there a little bit of a revenge factor here for Brady and Belichick?
Yes and no. The big thing is you can't get 19-0 back. If it was a Super Bowl where the Pats had finished 14-2 and then went through the playoffs and you lose in the Super Bowl, I think that scenario matches up better in people's minds for a rematch. But you're not getting 19-0 back with a win in this Super Bowl. And like you said, there's very few players from each team that were actually even there in 08 Super Bowl. So, you know, for me, I'm bitter. I hope the Pats win big time, but I'm not sure that's going to happen.
We're talking to Super Bowl champion Heath Evans, and obviously Heath does a great work with the Heath Evans Foundation that provides aid to children who were sexually abused, and we've done a ton of work with the organization. Heath does a great job with it. And Heath, Eli Manning, where do you think he ranks right now in the game? You take all the quarterbacks, where do you take Eli Manning?
Well, it's always hard to judge because they all play with different defenses, different offensive schemes, different personnel wrapped around them. But he's on par with all of them. And I put Brady and Breeze, Rodgers, you name it. For me, it always comes down to what do they do before the ball's snapped? You know, how smart are these guys? A lot of guys can throw great balls. A lot of guys can learn the playbook. A lot of guys can do, the details that go into being a good quarterback. But the details that go into being a great quarterback is really, for the first time this season, is what I've seen out of Eli. You know, the defensive manipulation before the ball's even snapped. You know, the control that he has of his team, the checks that he makes, the comfortability factor that he has in the pocket. The kid's playing amazing football. And I say kid, I mean, it's hard to believe it's 8 years for him already. But I'm telling you, he is playing at the highest level there is in this game. A
big advantage that the Giants have in this game is their wide receiving core going up against the secondary of the New England Patriots. Break down that matchup for me.
Well, you know, I look at the matchups different. I mean, everyone always wants to put player for player. Well, that's just not the case. You know, there's all kinds of the full 11 defensive scheme that Eli's going to play down in and down out that ultimately he has to attack. And so, you know, you think, you know, Manningham and Cruz and Nix, you know, you look at those guys, well, nobody one-on-one's going to match up in those secondary. But when you look at, okay, who is Bill Belichick and how has he confused quarterbacks for decades? And that's what you kind of bring to the table. So I think it's a lot of different things. I think they need to do what they've done all year. Been very, very good stopping the run. If they want to have a chance of winning this game, you've got to make Eli one-dimensional. And that sounds very kind of average analysis, but I don't think it's ever more true in this particular game. And I think that's true for the Patriots as well. If they can't run the football, they will not win the Super Bowl.
And a big thing that's going to help the Patriots out in this game is their defensive line. Everyone looks at the Giants' defensive line, as they should, because the Giants' defensive line is better, but the Patriots' defensive line has been playing well. Have you been surprised how guys, we all know Will Fork, you're going to get from Will Fork. He's a great player. But when you look at guys like Kyle Love, Brian Dedrick, Mark Anderson, look at those guys. Are you a little bit surprised by them, the way they've been playing so well so far this year?
No, only because if you're not playing well, if there's not kind of potential on the horizon, you're just not going to be there. I mean, we saw the Albert Haynesworth deal. There was no growth. Bill obviously didn't see any of the things that he wanted to see, so bye-bye, there you go. And that's the way the Patriot way is structured. So there's always been something in Bill's mind with the players that he has that he knows good and well there's growth factor potential. And so that's what we're seeing now, possibly hitting their stride at the right time. A lot of pressure. You mentioned Vince Wilfork. If he plays the way he played versus the Ravens, versus the Giants, he'll win the game single-handedly.
We're talking to Heath Evans here on Radio Row at the Peerless Boilers set in Indianapolis this Sunday, 6:30. The New England Patriots play the New York Football Giants, and that Giants pass rush has been lethal all year throughout. I don't think you could stop them, but you can contain them and you can limit them. Do you think the Patriots' offensive line, they have a very good line. How can they go? What are some ways through the techniques that they could try to stop Jason Pierre-Paul?
Well, I think you can make them look really bad, honestly. I mean, I think that there was times where San Francisco was able to do that to them. And when you're able to run the football, you really neutralize the effect of great pass rushers. There's always the tendency when you're throwing the ball so much like the Giants have done, like the Patriots do, these guys just pin their ears back and they just come after you. Your pass rush ability is limitless because there is no fear of a draw or a quick hitting run play, splitting your gap and beating you for 10 or 12 yards. So I go back to the run game of the Patriots, and I think people love to talk about Gronk's ankle and the passing game. I think it's almost more important for him to be healthy for the run game when they match up against this defense to be able to consistently run the ball. I think Gronk has to be a big part of that, have a healthy ankle to be able to get those second-level blocks that they depend on him for, and then that's the way you neutralize these four speedy athletes. And then another way is you put an offensive personnel on the field that dictates to the Giants if they have to have two true defensive tackles on the field, a Rocky Bernard, a Chris Canty. Keep those guys on the field so you're not dealing with four speedsters, you're dealing with two speedsters.
Ben Jarvis-Greenells, he has to run the ball. He has to do a good job. And, yes, he's never fumbled the ball. That's another reason why he's still on this team. We've seen many running backs through the Patriots throughout Belichick's career here in New England, Lawrence Maroney being one of them. He fumbled the ball. He danced before. He didn't just hit the hole. That's why he's no longer there. And Ben Jarvis-Greenells has been very consistent. But two other guys that are flying under the radars, where if you would have asked me 5 years ago if it would have been these two guys, I would have said, no way, you're crazy. Chad Ochocinco and Deion Branch. Everyone's preparing for Rob Gronkowski. Everyone's preparing for Aaron Hernandez and Wes Welker. I would have to imagine, similar to that Denver Broncos game, you could see one of those guys breaking for a big play and scoring a touchdown.
Well, yeah, and I think Ocho will have a few chances. I do really like the Deion Branch call. I mean, other players are going to have to step up and make big plays. That's how Super Bowls are won. I mean, you look at David Tyree down the stretch, a special teams demon, not known for really his play-making, game-changing catching ability. And then what does he do in the last Super Bowl these two teams met up? So Deion knows this offense. He knows how to read coverages and defensive schemes. And so I think Brady is extremely comfortable with him. When you're trying to take Gronk and Hernandez and Wes out of the equation, there's always going to be a guy that's a little less in the coverage scheme, and that'll most likely probably be Deion Branch this week. You'll need a big game.
Now, I know you've been working closely with Gronkowski through your charity. Get any inside information? Gronkowski playing this week?
That big boy is tough as nails. You know he's going to play. Health-wise, what is he going to be at? I mean, people love to put percentages on things, but he's young. Everyone wants to talk about high ankle sprain and all this. The bottom line is, what is the kid, 23 years old, 24 max? You heal so fast at that age. It's not like, he was 32 in his 10th year like I was when you have major injuries. Those set you back. This kid, young, fresh, tough. Every time you talk to Bill or Brady about this guy, the first word that comes out of their mouth is, yeah, he's tough. Well, tough people play in games like this and find a way to play well.
Real quick, right before we let you go, tell me a little bit more about your charity, get the word out, and tell me how my viewers could go and donate this evening.
Yeah, heathevans.org is the website. Listen, everyone's been appalled by Penn State and Syracuse, all the nastiness surrounding the epidemic of childhood sexual abuse. And so, don't just be mad, do something about it. Go to heathevans.org. Help me battle and fight the epidemic that is this right here. 1 out of 4 girls, 1 out of 6 young boys before the age of 18 will be sexually abused in our country. So, listen, let that appall you. Let it spur you on to action and not just anger. And come out and help us out. heathevans.org.
I want to get one take here about the whole Penn State thing from you. And I know we've had you on, and you were great talking about the Penn State and everything that your charity does. Joe Paterno just passed away. In 10 years, let's say we're having the same conversation. We're hosting the Zach Gelb, Heath Evans show live at Radio Row.
Yeah.
And someone calls in and they say, what do you think about Joe Paterno? What's that one thing, not just from you, but in all of America, what do you think people are going to think about when they think about Joe Paterno and how much of this thing that happened at Penn State with Sandusky is going to knock his legacy?
Here's what I think. It'll ultimately probably depend on who you talk to, but for the majority of people across the world, I think this will be the lasting imprint on people's mindset about Joe Pa. And here's why. We live in the most forgiving country in the world. You say, I'm sorry, I screwed up, people are so quick to forgive because ultimately everybody knows we're all screw-ups at some point in time. There was no true, repentant, heartfelt apology. There was, oh, I wish I would have done more. There was no, let me take responsibility for my actions. I ask people this all the time. You think about Mike Tyson. People don't initially think about maybe the greatest heavyweight in the world ever. They think about a man who bit a man's ear off in the ring. They think about the lack of character that ultimately deterred an amazing boxing career. And it's sad, but I think the majority of people, if they're honest, when they think about Joe Pa, they'll think about a man that was in a position of power to do more and chose not to because of the loyalty to the game of football, loyalty to a university, and loyalty to coaches and his staff.
Heath, thanks so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for a few minutes.
Anytime, Zach. Appreciate you, buddy.